afternoon, everyone. And we're so glad you could join us for this part of our series on Alzheimer's and dementia. It's in cooperation between the Williamson County Public Library and the Alzheimer's Association Tennessee chapter. And we are honored to have our guest speaker and community educator, Ashley Briggs, to speak with us about home safety. If you have any questions for us, we will have a Q&A portion following the presentation that you are welcome to ask your questions then. And be sure to look out for our final in the series for this year, which would be Caregiving 101 on October 22nd with Robin Arab. And without further ado, here is Ashley Briggs.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all being here. Today, of course, we're going to be talking about home safety. There are things that we can do in our environment, technologies available to allow someone that's living with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia to live happily and safely at home for as long as possible. As she said, I'm a community educator with the Alzheimer's Association. I have been volunteering with the association for almost as long as I've been working in senior living, so about 17 years. Like so many people, not just sitting in this room, but people you pass at the grocery store, sit next to at church, I too have had a family touched by this disease. I watched my mother care for my great-grandfather probably over 20 years ago as he was progressing through Alzheimer's. And we recently lost my grandfather's wife this year from Alzheimer's. So it touches so many people. So even if there's a tip or trick that doesn't work for you today, it's something maybe that a friend, a neighbor might benefit from the knowledge as well. So with the right safety measures in place, an individual living with Alzheimer's can still live comfortably in his or her own home or in a caregiver's residence. As the disease progresses, their not just mental but physical abilities do change. And with some creativity and flexibility and a village, the home can be adapted to support these changes. So let's talk first about what is Alzheimer's dementia and how it affects someone's safety. Alzheimer's disease causes a variety of changes in the brain's makeup and in the body that affects someone's safety. Depending on what stage of the disease they're in, this can include someone's ability to make proper judgment. It can affect someone's sense of time and place. It can create behavior and personality changes. It affects physical ability and can change how people perceive their senses. So we're going to go over some home safety tips. Again, not everything may work for you, but hopefully you walk away with a good toolkit today to move forward with some progress and changes in the environment. So we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about, let's start first with evaluating your environment. You don't know what to change until you know, correct? So there are a lot of ways that you can do that. I encourage individuals to talk with their doctors about what these physical changes and cognitive changes could be coming down the line. And you can, there are professionals that are skilled in this, occupational therapists, even within a senior living setting. I have occupational therapists look at our residents' environment and give us tips on where they think we can make some changes in the environment to make it more safe physically. So those may be things like grab bars in the bathroom and the shower area. It may be simply decluttering. It could be locking away certain items that are no longer safe. With that, talking about avoiding safety hazards in the kitchen. There's a lot in the kitchen that we use every day, but can pose a safety threat as people's cognitive and physical abilities decline. So it may be keeping drawers locked that have cabinets locked that have chemicals in them, locking drawers with sharp knives. Having, if you're able to, you can have a cutoff switch maybe installed for the oven or microwave space. So if you're leaving the house, you can cut those items off, or simply unplugging certain appliances that may cause those risks. It's important to be prepared for emergencies. We all get anxious if an emergency happens. With someone living with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia is in the mix of an emergency, it can be extremely confusing and can increase someone's fall risk. It can increase their wandering risk. So looking at what you need to do for your loved one to prepare in the event of various emergencies. Make sure safety devices are in working order. So maybe you have, as we all probably remember, the "I've fallen and can't get up" button. Utilizing technology like that, but making sure they work properly. Making sure smoke detectors are working properly, especially if it's someone that's still cooking at home. Install locks out of sight. So we're going to talk a little bit about wandering later on in the program. But some things you can do is, say, basement doors, installing deadbolts on those that are either up high or down low. So it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind. Closet doors where you may be storing unsafe items, again, locking up high or low. Keeping walkways and rooms well lit. When we think of Alzheimer's, we think of memory loss, but so much else is going on in the brain. And one of those changes that can happen is an individual's visual perception. Things can look really far away or much closer. So keeping the rooms well lit, having night lights in various rooms for nighttime is really important. Not just with keeping them well lit, also looking at patterns. Some of our loved ones have really beautiful, intricate rugs in their home. Those may not be appropriate anymore because those patterns can be considered, different depths. So it becomes a tripping hazard, not because they're going to trip on the rug, but they're trying to step over the item that looks like it's a lot closer. That goes for stairs, making sure that those are well indicated. It could be putting, and I know it's not pretty, but maybe putting the reflective tape on the edge so it shows where there's a beginning and end to a stair. Because stairs that are all the same color can look, with those visual changes, like it's all one space. Consider removing any weapons, firearms that are in the home. If they're not removed, having them locked in a safe place. Again, those cognitive changes and behavioral changes that can happen with Alzheimer's, confusion of time and place, can create periods of fear for someone with Alzheimer's because they don't know in that moment what's going on or who this person is coming to visit. So it's better just to have those things, again, out of sight, out of mind. Place medications in locked drawers or cabinets. I often, in my industry, as people are looking at moving into senior living, we'll have families that talk about, Mom, I gave Mom her medication this morning. She didn't remember, so she went and got a second dose herself. Or Dad didn't know that his blood pressure medicine was not Tylenol and took something he wasn't supposed to. They make really great medication boxes now that actually have timers on them. So you can disperse medication on a timer. So once it's out, it's there to take, but everything stays locked up at that point. And we don't think, again, about those sensory changes necessarily, so keeping an eye on temperature of water and food. As we're progressing through the disease, how we perceive temperature changes can change, or our reaction time to those. So I may not realize that I've turned my shower up to the hottest temperature it can be. I get in and my body takes a bit to realize that I'm actually injuring myself. I'm scalding myself with the water. So keeping an eye on things like that. Some other things to do are to secure large furniture. Again, that's a safety risk to any of us. But if you have someone as well that maybe their gait isn't as good, their balance is off, and they stumble into a large piece of furniture, we want to alleviate any risk of further injury of something falling. Avoid injury in the bathroom. So according to the National Institute on Health, 80% of falls for seniors happen in the bathroom. We have slippery surfaces, water, maybe even changing clothes in the bathroom. So there's a lot of things that come into play of being a fall risk. So I suggest in the middle of the night, maybe getting up to go to the bathroom, still a little disoriented, it's dark, forgetful of where things are. So I encourage people just to put like a small lamp or nightlight in the bathroom. Improve laundry room safety. Again, we're looking at what are things that could potentially be ingested when we're looking in laundry room, where we see detergents. We often store our cleaning chemicals there. Someone with Alzheimer's may not understand that a laundry pod is a laundry pod. They may think it's something edible. So those are all things to kind of look at. Assess safety hazards in the garage and or basement. There's a lot of things that go on in the garage and basement, tools, chemicals being stored, the lighting, looking at those things and determining, are those spaces that should just be off limits? So that's a decision you have to make as a caregiver. And ultimately, supporting the person's needs really plays a role in safety. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about wandering, but oftentimes things like falls or taking the wrong medicine, maybe even accidentally burning things on the stove, those all center around a need that that individual has that they're trying to meet themselves. So let's talk about wandering. It's probably the largest safety risk when someone is living at home alone or in their caregiver's residence. Everyone with Alzheimer's or related dementia is at risk for wandering. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. I think everybody's experienced maybe going on vacation or a business trip. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night in a hotel room and you're disoriented because you've forgotten where you are. Imagine waking up like that in your own personal space. You get up, you start looking for what's familiar. Our minds allow us to piece together what previously happened. Okay, I'm not at home. I'm in a hotel room. Okay, I'll go back to bed. Filtering out those thoughts, thinking back to what happened previously, those things become a lot more difficult as the disease progresses to the point of not a possibility anymore. So that puts them at a risk of wandering to seek out to meet either a need or to find familiarity. So let's talk about some signs of someone that might be at risk of wandering, because we've talked about a lot of things we can do, but we need to know, is that person at risk at that moment? Is this something that we need to plan for in the future, or is this an immediate change we need to make? Though it's not, tried and true that these are only the signs of wandering, these are definitely key items to look for. If someone enjoys going on regular walks, or they're driving to the same places all the time, those are really ingrained in our mind. I mean, who here has been on autopilot in the car, heading to the same spot, and you get halfway there and you go, it's like I was phased out. But if you're seeing that the individual's coming home later than usual, that's a risk for wandering. Forgetting how to get to familiar places, again, puts someone at risk, because all it takes is that left turn instead of the right in the car to be in a completely unfamiliar place. Again, we, without Alzheimer's, are able to discern what our next steps need to be when we get lost. That ability goes away. If they're talking about fulfilling former obligations, such as going to work, I've met with families where a wife has felt like she doesn't know what to do because her husband has started getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting dressed, heading to the car to go to work, and he's been retired for 30 years. It's very hard to grasp that change. But if they're talking about doing that, then there is the risk of getting in the car and driving and not knowing how to get back. Trying or wanting to go home, even when at home. Sometimes we have to figure out, what does home mean? Home may not be the home they've been in for 40 years. Maybe it's their childhood home. And that to them is what is familiar. So if they're talking about needing to go home and they're in that familiar place, that really should raise a red flag for you. Pacing, repetitive movements, being restless, having difficulty locating familiar places even within the home. And again, there's some safety measures to help with that, like putting a nightlight in the bathroom if you know someone gets up during the night to use it. It's that beacon of light, quite literally, there for what their need is that we need to meet. They might ask about whereabouts of past friends and family, maybe individuals that are long gone. Again, seeking something out. Acting as if if they're doing a hobby or chore, but nothing's getting done. Appearing lost in a new or changed environment. There may be an evaluation that you make about family vacations. Maybe we change the way that looks. Because even though you're going to the same beach house you've been going to for 20 years, that setting can be completely new to the individual and increase the risk of wandering, confusion, and agitation. If they become nervous or anxious in crowded areas, I've described this before. If anyone's ever been to like a rock concert where you've got lights and loud sounds and people milling about and it's crowded, we get overstimulated in that setting. That's kind of how the whole world can feel with someone with Alzheimer's. They can't filter out what's important to take in sensory-wise and what's not. So they may start to seek out a quieter place. I mean, if you think about it where we're at right now, I can hear someone mowing outside. We can hear residual of maybe the air conditioning, someone rustling in their seat. but you're still paying attention to me, and I'm able to pay attention to the information I'm giving because my brain can filter those things out. Alzheimer's takes that filter away. So if it's getting overwhelming, they're going to seek out somewhere that's not. But there are plenty of things that we can do to reduce the risk, but you can't eliminate it completely. So it's always about being realistic in our expectations of what we're doing. And I say that because a caregiver's greatest critic is themselves. And you will try various techniques, and what may work really, really well today may not work tomorrow. So it's good to have plenty of plans in place to help yourself, but also give yourself grace. So what can we do? Wandering is a risk. We want to make sure that our loved one is safe in the home where they feel comfortable, where you're caregiving for them, or even early stages still living independent, but prepping for what could come. It's important to provide opportunities for an individual to engage in meaningful activities throughout the day. And as the disease progresses, it becomes a lot harder to create a routine for ourselves, but the things we enjoy are still going to be the things we enjoy. As the caregiver, then it becomes your role to figure out how to adapt meaningful activities to meet them where they are, so that they can continue to do those things. People that are engaged in meaningful activities throughout the day are at less risk of wandering and of falling. It might be that you need to identify a time of day where someone's more likely to wander. There's something you may have heard of called sundowning syndrome. A lot of people associate it with later in the day, hence sundowning. But for some individuals, it can be in the morning, and then there's a calm in the evening. So monitoring how your loved one is perceiving the day, what may be making them anxious and what not, to plan things to do around that time. Activities and exercise can help reduce anxiety, agitation, and restlessness. Again, meeting a need so they're not having to try to seek out the solution themselves. Ensuring all basic needs are met, including going to the bathroom, nutrition, hydration. Our bodies tell us when we're hungry, when we're thirsty. As the disease progresses, we may not always be able to understand those cues. And I may need to go to the bathroom, but I can't tell you that's what I need to do. And maybe I don't know that's what I need to do. I just know I'm uncomfortable in that moment. So I'm searching out what's going to make me comfortable. Involve the person, especially if they're living with you, if you're the caregiver. Involve them in daily activities such as allowing them to help fold laundry, preparing dinner, giving them some of the tasks to assist with. In my senior living setting, let me backtrack a little bit. I don't think anybody ever loses the need for meaning and purpose and to be helpful. So oftentimes with my residents, I use the phrase, "Would you help me with?" And I give them a small task to help me with. And that might be folding napkins, because that's a very easy, repetitive movement. Helping me sort supplies. I have a resident who is in charge. It's become her job that she sharpens all the pencils before art class. Giving those things that they can be a part of too. Because even though someone with Alzheimer's needs our help, They still want to help too. You want to make sure that you're reassuring the person if they're feeling lost, abandoned, or disoriented. I always say try to take out the no, don't, can't. You may know that their children are grown and living on their own, but today they need to meet them at the bus stop. And you're not going to help that feeling by saying, no, we don't need to go to the bus stop. We can't see them. Your daughter lives in California. She's already out there. She has 2 kids. Remember you went to her wedding a few years ago? We want to pull away from that. So trying to find what it is that will reassure them. Maybe it's, I'll use that example again, got to get to the bus stop for the kids. Oh, well, tell me about your daughter. I don't think I've met her yet, but I've talked to her on the phone. Kind of a redirection. We're focusing on what her need is, and her need at that moment is a connection to her children. But we're presenting it in a way that maybe we're redirecting to a more productive conversation that'll help calm the situation. If they're still safely able to drive, there are a lot of people now that are getting diagnosis a lot earlier in the disease process, which is great. So they're living longer knowing that they have this disease independently in their home. But you might want to consider using a GPS device just in case they get lost. So many of us, regardless of age, whether we're 40s, 50s, 90s, carry cell phones using things like the Find My Phone app or Life 360 on the phone, air tags in vehicles. Having things like that to help you have that peace of mind and them still having some of that independence. If they're not able to drive, that's a really, really tough conversation to have. Our cars, so early on, are a symbol of our independence and freedom, and that is so hard to let go of, especially if we have forgotten that we forget. But so you might need to be the bad guy in the moment. Find ways to remove access to car keys. I've known people that don't want to take the keys away, but they make sure some things are unhooked under the hood. And it's, we're going to have to get it to the mechanic tomorrow. How about I take you to the store today? So it's some finagling in those situations. For some people, it may be a conversation with the doctor. So many people see the doctor as the expert and takes the bad guy role off your plate. Have that discussion with your loved one's PCP about driving safety, and maybe they're the ones that make the determination. Avoid busy places that are confusing and can cause disorientation, such as shopping malls. Maybe don't go shopping at the Green Hills Mall on a Saturday. I don't know if there is a good time at all to go shopping at the Green Hills Mall, but maybe you time that a little differently. You find shopping may be very enjoyable for someone, but you've got to find the right time to do it or a different location. Assess the person's response to new surroundings. And if you're finding more fidgeting, restlessness, even kind of looking around the room, that might be a good sign for you that it's not a good idea to go to brand new surroundings anymore. Or at least don't leave them unattended in a new environment. Have an extra set of hands with you when you go out to eat at a restaurant. My residents love to go out to eat. They were going to go to Leaper's Fork early this morning, but that didn't go too well with how wet and rainy it was. But they enjoy doing that, So it's all hands on deck for that kind of thing. We get extra people to go with us. And as a caregiver, connect with your support system. Ask your best friend to go to lunch with you and your mom. Ask your sister to go shopping with you and your mom. Having that extra support. Or it may be just altering where those new situations just aren't going to happen anymore, and that's okay. It's then on us as caregivers to give ourselves permission to say, I know Mom loved going to walk the mall, but it's a negative experience for her every time we've done it. So it's just not what we need to do anymore. So in the early stages of the disease, like I said, there are people getting these diagnoses earlier, where we have leaps and bounds to go with people having the information they need, but we are in a much better place with having access to resources now that people are able to live at home independently. There are some things to do if they're living at home and not with you that you can plan together to set up routines to help reduce the risk of wandering or getting lost. You might want to decide on a set time of day that you check in with each other. Before my grandfather and his wife had moved into an assisted living, it kind of worked out well that they get a phone call when they were going to take their medicines. There's a good check-in. It might be that you set an alarm on your loved one's phone that when it rings, it says, call Susie, and can check in. Review scheduled activities and appointments for the day together. Especially early stages, using a calendar is so helpful. It's a great tool to help kind of guide how their routine should be. If the care partner is not available, identify a backup, a companion for the person as needed. Maybe that's asking a neighbor to check in on them periodically. Maybe it's a church member, whomever that might be. There are caregiver services where you can hire a professional caregiver that comes for certain hours of the day to help them. Maybe they're prepping meals, checking in on them, making sure their medications are set up, but they don't need someone all the time. Consider alternative transportation options if someone's getting lost or not driving safely or driving safely is a concern. Again, that can be relying on a support system or a paid service. Again, we have so many ways we can schedule Ubers for other people on our phones now and Lyfts. So there's a lot out there available to us. Some of these we've already talked about, but again, kind of going back to physical things that we can do in our own home as we're taking on the caregiving. Maybe we're moving our loved one in, or it's your spouse. Placing deadbolts out of the line of sight, like I said earlier, either high or low on exterior doors. That doesn't mean that you lock them in the house. We don't want to leave someone unattended, unsupervised, where they can't get out in the event of an emergency. Use night lights throughout the home. There are motion detecting lights that you can place along the baseboards of your hallway. They have them where they can go under your bed, so when someone steps off, turns and puts their feet down, the lights can trigger. So much out there that we didn't have even just a decade ago. Simple things like covering doorknobs with a cloth that's the same color as the door. We're using some of those sensory changes to help with safety. So maybe there's nighttime wandering. So you have something that goes over the brass colored doorknob that's on the white door that helps camouflage it. You can even camouflage doors by having them painted the same color as the walls around them. It could be a visual barrier. There are warning bells that you can install above your door. There are monitoring devices available that can signal when a door is opened. Again, with the technology of our smartphones, there are Wi-Fi and Bluetooth-enabled items that are quite easy to install, and you can monitor them from your cell phone. They make pressure-sensitive mats that you could place in front of a door or at their bedside, again, to alert you of movement. There are less technology-based things that you can do around your home as well. Putting hedges or a fence around your patio or yard, so it still gives them a safe outdoor space to enjoy. Use safety gates or brightly colored netting to prevent access to stairs or to outside. Monitor noise levels so that we're reducing extensive stimulation. Again, sometimes that wandering is trying to get away from something that's creating fear or agitation or confusion. Creating indoor and outdoor spaces that can be safely explored for them. You can label doors with signs or symbols to indicate what the purpose of the room. Put a sign that says bathroom on the bathroom door. So when they're trying to seek out where to use the bathroom, there it is. Another visual for them. You might want to store items that may be a trigger to a person's instinct to leave, such as coats, hats, pocketbooks, keys, wallets. A challenge to accept for some people is maybe even storing items that trigger some memories from the past. So it might be removing pictures of their children as children, because that might spark that search for the young kids and they're not home. I've had instances where for many years someone had photo albums that were very calming to them, but then reached a stage where those pictures then were upsetting because they're looking for their mom that they're seeing in those pictures or their sister. And this we may not even think about is if we're taking our loved one somewhere, even just to pop into a store, there is a time it may not be appropriate to leave them waiting in the car, even if it's for just a few minutes. Because they may have forgotten that you just said, I'm going to pop in and get my prescription, or I'm going to fill up the gas. So when that happens, if they forget, then naturally they're going to start looking for you. So a lot to take in. It is. There's a lot we can do, but the biggest thing is planning ahead. I know it's tough conversations to have with either your loved one or family or friends about what do we need to do in case this happens. The stress experienced by families and caregivers when a person living with dementia wanders and becomes lost is significant. So have a plan in place before that happens. There are programs, there's Wandering Response Service where they can have a bracelet or you can register the person into this system in the event that they do wander. And first responders are able to identify who the person is. Ask neighbors, friends, and family to call if they see the person wandering, if they're lost, or even if they see that they might be dressed inappropriately. You know, my gentleman that was getting dressed to go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, that was really scary for his wife because he really amped up in the middle of winter, and he was not dressing in winter attire. And so it was a fear of hers that he would go out in the cold and suffer physical harm from that. Know the person's neighborhood. Identify potentially dangerous areas that are near the home, such as bodies of water, open stairwells, dense foliage, bus stops, real easy to get pretty far from home. Even someone that has physical difficulty, with the right resources, the Good Samaritan that stops to help them get to the next place. Which leads me into the next one, creating a list of places that they might go to. If they love reminiscing about their childhood home, that's something to think about. Having a list of your check spots in the event someone wanders. Where they may have worked previously. Their church, place of worship, or favorite restaurant. Knowing where their familiar places are can help you in the search in the event of a wandering emergency. So I know that's a lot to take in. And if you just take anything from this at all, is look for resources, ask questions with the Alzheimer's Association. I'll kind of touch base on what's here because there's a lot of, like I said, technology that is really advanced and some pretty simplistic things that are available now. I could list all day. I just learned actually last year there is a wandering patch you can get. So it looks like a bandage, and the person, you can put it on their back where they can't see it, and it has a GPS tracker in it. So you can use those. They have items that can be placed in people's shoes that, again, has GPS on it. There are phones that are specifically made for those living with Alzheimer's. Maybe one of the safety risks or something that may cause them to be upsetting is they pick up the phone and they call all these phone numbers that are just ingrained in their mind, but they're not connected to an individual they know anymore. They make phones where you can have a picture of an individual, and when they push it, it calls that person. So you have a picture of their granddaughter, a picture of their daughter, their best friend. So a lot of things available to modify the environment to meet the needs of the person where they're at. And if you're looking for more that is very specific to you, obviously we can have a Q&A here in a few moments, but we also have a 24/7 hotline through the Alzheimer's Association. So no matter what time of day, whether it's Christmas Day or just next Tuesday, this 1-800-272-3900 is manned by real people at all times. It's with the national office, and if you need to be then disseminated down to the local Tennessee office, they can help with that. ALZ.org has a lot of the information that I shared today and links to various resources, places to purchase those items for home safety, and just to get more information like events like we have today. So those are our tools for you that are available both locally and on a national level.